Hello everybody and welcome to our presentation today, which is about the markr software package that we have been developing over the last few years. Lisa de Bruin is the developer, and myself, Helena Patterson, and Phil McAleer, we give her ideas for things to add in, and we have made some of the examples that people will use in some of the support materials for the package as well. Okay, so just very quickly, the take-home messages for today. First of all, we created markr to do repetitive admin tasks that was costing us time not spent on actually marking. However, it gives us a lot more than just that. It automates the process of producing feedback sheets from spreadsheets. It works very well with our VLE, with Moodle. In order to get to it, and something that we're going to encourage you to do, is that we reconceptualized our feedback as data. And we would encourage you to do that as well, because it helps you to see what elements are flexible within your feedback, are movable and changeable, and which parts are static. And we feel that only one or two people, in our team there's 3 people that can use this extensively, but only a few people need to be able to do a very small amount of coding for everyone to benefit from using this tool. So within this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about how markr came about. I'm going to then show some examples of feedback and talk about the practicalities. Okay, so where it all started. About 5 or 6 years ago, we started using electronic assessment. We started getting our students to submit their assignments online, and then we shared their feedback online with them as well. Previous to that, we had pieces of paper that we would fill in by hand. So there would be tick boxes, there would be spaces for comments and things like that. And we transferred that practice to online or to electronic feedback when we did that. So I generated, for instance, elaborate Word documents where there would be a number of different boxes. There would be boxes telling you about the criteria, the student's ID. For each of the assessment criteria, the marker would be expected to write a few brief comments or type in a few brief comments, and then also type in an overall comment. And all of this together would form the feedback sheet for the students. They might have this along with their any script comments. So some feedback takes script comments and some feedback doesn't. And then we would also generate an overall message to the students, to the cohort, saying about how they had done generally as a class on the assessment, how this links to their previous assessment, and how it links to their future assessments. So many different pieces of information. But one of the things that we discovered was that for a student themselves, this would often be located in many different places as well. So I can think of one set of feedback that actually has 5 different things that the student needs to look at. Some of it is together and some of it is in different places. This is obviously not that great for feedback literacy, because the student has to access these things in so many different locations. So they might focus only on their own feedback sheet, and they might focus only on their script comments, but they would maybe neglect the general overall class comment. They wouldn't necessarily want to or have time or feel the importance of accessing that information. So we did find that we wanted to include that as part of the students' individual feedback. However, these Word documents that I produced were static, so they don't change. So adding this extra information on top of a feedback sheet would have to be done as a separate document. And we wanted to find a way of including that and also any other information for the student. The other thing about these feedback sheets is, because of the static nature of them, once you have completed it, there's very little will for a person to go back to it. There's very little will for you to revisit your feedback over and over again. In fact, we don't actually, in terms of the time pressures and for some of the amount of marking that we do, that we really don't actually have the time to be able to revisit feedback sheets over and over again. For that same reason, moderating consistency in a marking team is challenging as well, and more time consuming than it needs to be. because a course lead needs to visit all of these sheets time and time again. So what tends to happen is that we do what is required from the university, and that is pretty much all that we have time for, we're able to allocate time for. Also, they're prone to avoidable errors, like people put the wrong student ID in, people save the folder in the file in the wrong folder. There might be incorrect spelling and things like that. So there are some avoidable errors that creep in just because, for instance, in my last lot of marking, I had to do 144 pieces. That would have been impossible to do this and keep the same consistency as our students are expecting across that thing. Well, no, actually not impossible, but very difficult and time consuming. And finally, when I made these, I included these nested tables, which are really bad for digital accessibility. Screen readers can't deal with them very well. And so we would need to re-establish what these look like. However, some of the reason we put the tables there in the first place was to try and help students draw their attention to the correct parts and to put everything together. So again, what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person. So we do need to find ways of resolving this. And I think ultimately at the bottom of this sits, we have 15,000 pieces of coursework that has to be taken in, marked, processed, sent back to students as feedback. And this is a huge amount of stuff. In order to make this work, we have made very efficient processes in Moodle and to be able to work with Moodle. But those processes mean a little bit of work for each marker. So trying to reduce the work for markers so that they can spend it on feedback, that was really the ultimate goal with this. And people like Lisa became very quickly frustrated at the snail's pace of how this works. So some of the things that changed for us was that we actually made some curriculum changes, which meant that a lot more people were coding regularly and were teaching coding to our students, which facilitated this idea of changing the way that we conceptualize our marking and starting to think about our feedback as data, as movable elements, because we became a lot better, just not just us as individuals, but generally everybody became a lot better at understanding how data works and how coding works. We started making exam feedback as well. That was a big push towards helping us improve our NSS ratings. And so we started doing this exam feedback. And for that, we needed an automated process that would do the trick really, really well. And so that was how markr came about. But really, ultimately, as I said before, there were admin tasks that we wanted to minimize, while we wanted to maximize the amount of time that we had available to produce the feedback, which is what the students really want us to have. They don't see the admin in the background. All they see are the feedback sheets. So some of the other challenges that markr helped us to overcome was incorporating this general class feedback with individual feedback. Now, it seems a trivial thing to be writing the class feedback, but one of the things that you often find is that maybe for a number of pieces you see the same themes emerging, and you find better and better ways of saying it. But then going back and having a student earlier in your marking list benefit from that better articulation, that becomes a chore. And, sometimes you would do that chore, but that then would, at the other end of your marking, minimize the amount of time that you have left over to do it, because we all have other pressures. And so it becomes this sort of like tug of war between, do I just put things in a general thing for people, or can I put things a little bit more individually, and how does all these things work together? Because each cohort is different, and the way that they respond to an assignment is different. We try to keep things consistent, but really, as we all know, students have individual journeys, and that can be represented at a cohort level as well. There's also a lot of admin load on our course leads and program leads to be looking across this feedback, especially in very large classes. And so markr helps us to reduce this. It helps us in updating feedback. So for instance, if you marked a certain number of pieces and then you have a markers meeting, or another marker in your team articulates something very well, or you talk about marking and you realize that you maybe have been going down the wrong route, this helps you to update that feedback really quickly and easily. It helps us to monitor consistency. For instance, from these, you can, if you see feedback as data, and this is a presentation that we presented last time, you can start doing things like counting the number of words that people do. And we can see inconsistency, for instance, in the number of words you would use for an A student, a B student, a C student, a D student. You might use more words for some and fewer for others. But students perceive this as unfairness. And so it's not necessarily the number of words or the quality of words, but it's kind of like paying attention to the fact that if somebody's doing well, tell them what specifically they're doing well at, things like that. But this helps us to monitor those kinds of consistency. And also, it really helps us with digital accessibility, as I'll show you in a little while. Okay. We found other benefits from this. So while we were focused initially on the consistency, and making and being able to go back and update feedback during the moderation process and things like that, making those more efficient, we actually find that markr optimizes marking time. It really saves you time. That admin process really saves you time, and the amount of feedback that I can produce and using the same amount of time, especially when it comes to overall cohort feedback and really engaging in that reflective process, has increased massively since I started using this. It gives us markr feedback analytics as well. So you can do reporting for external examiners if you want to, identify common themes in student assessments that you need to address in future teaching, for instance. Those become a little bit easier. And report or themes across different assignments as well. And reports for marker consistency during the moderation process as well. We also, in exam feedback, we add grade distributions for students to their feedback sheets, because they ask us for this, and that's something that reassures them. They feel that they really like to know where they're sitting in terms of the cohort, and it also helps us to add consistency across course presentations. Now, students don't feel that there's a difference qualitatively between the word process sheets we gave before and the marker sheets we that we gave afterwards. But some of the things are, since we introduce exam feedback, which would not be possible without markr in our case, we've seen a year-on-year increase in our NSS ratings, and since we often find that there's a lot fewer comments from students about inconsistency. So the tools that we use here does help in a number of important ways. Okay, so in terms of the practicalities, we use spreadsheets in order to do our marking. On it, you will have student information, you'll have some kind of representation of the ILOs and assessment criteria, you have the student grades and some kind of overall comment. So taking your original word sheet or the original conceptualization that you have of the feedback, all the changeable elements, all the elements unique to a student gets represented on an Excel sheet. And then the bit that markr does is it takes the information from that Excel sheet to generate a feedback sheet for each individual student. Okay, so on that feedback sheet, you can represent general information that you want to give to all the students. So advice about what they need to do with the feedback, specific cohort-wide comments about different things that the different assessment criteria, rubrics that you might want to add into there. And then you have the individual student components as well. So who the student is, for instance, we always want to represent that, and then the feedback that is unique to them. I have to say one thing about these Excel sheets. If you're taking this on, is that I don't particularly enjoy writing my overall comment paragraph on Excel. So my practice previously, when I was using Word documents, was to write it separately and keep those together. So that I could refer back to those kinds of things. That helped me in the consistency before I was using markr. But now I still use that same practice. I have a separate document in which I keep all these comments, and then I would copy them and paste them into the Excel sheet for markr. And here are just the different parts of the Excel sheet and how they're represented on the feedback sheet. So for instance, information about the ILOs, people's individual achievement on those ILOs, and their overall comment. So all these elements are drawn from the Excel sheet. Okay, just having a look at the exam feedback that we produce. This is a typical exam feedback sheet for a student. And the way that I make that, and you can see there are distributions at the bottom, general kind of comment in the middle, and the student's individual features or individual feedback at the top there. It starts as an Excel sheet that I download. We have a markr interface where all our markers literally just give feedback on 3 points for the person, and then the marker spends about half an hour or so writing per question some feedback, sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less if they need to. But the individual elements then are represented for the student, as well as the general comments. This is for the class, the overall class, and then also the distributions, which the students find very helpful. Now, beyond what we have done in the exam feedback, because that very much is probably the most basic feedback that we have, we also developed some extra features, and these are just some of the things that we have done. So for instance, I have these bits about what you do with your feedback. That includes things like links to other resources, or links to leads for the students to make appointments for general advice about their writing. Also, most of our feedback sheets has details of the markr on them, and details of how to contact them, so that the students can come and visit us for additional feedback, probably the first port of call before they go anywhere else. Phil has this nice little thing where he puts in things like Helena says, and I add tabs to a lot of things to help navigation through the documents, because these are HTML documents. So you can add quite a lot of nice navigation without it compromising the digital accessibility. My last lot had quite a lot of general things, and then the person's individual feedback as well. Lisa's latest assignment had this really nice table of contents. This was for a programming assignment, and so there was a lot of different elements, all of which could have individual feedback. It didn't take Lisa a lot longer to make individual feedback for the students, but she was able to give them quite a lot of different content. So here, for instance, part of this was that they had to make a table of contents as well, and so she gave some feedback about how that table of content would look better by making a version herself. So another practicality is how to get it into Moodle, and this is actually fairly quick and efficient. Moodle allows you to make individual or upload individual folders for each student, and so we just use that functionality, and markr makes folders for students based on the Moodle ID that you feed in, and then we upload that, use the multiple upload tool, and upload the feedback like that. It's very quick. It's also proven robust against Moodle updates. So there's been a number of Moodle updates since we started with markr, and it works fine every time. And then I've also check the digital accessibility. So I would do that for my sheets. And the last one, which was quite a complex sheet, came back with 97% accessibility, which is really great. And the things there are things like setting the language and stuff like that, which I'm not particularly sure I know how to do. But I'm really waiting for bated breath for Blackboard LA to come back with some advice on how I can do that. Okay, so that's really a little potted history of markr and some of the features that it can do, and I hope that you find this really helpful.